I've spent the last 10 years working with people with disabilities to promote their participation in society on an equal basis with others. And I say their, but I really should say our, because I identify as a person with a disability. Actually, a person with multiple disabilities. I first became aware of disability rights when I was taking my master's degree. A few of my colleagues were doing research on health and disability and kind of things from that angle. So I knew of the field, but I just never really thought it was for me. At the time, I was really concerned with maternal health and the HIV/AIDS epidemic and indigenous health. And in my spare time, I would do things like go folk dancing, and I would play racquetball with some of my friends. And after a couple of years, I began to notice that after I would go dancing or play racquetball, my ankle would be really sore after the activity and then the next day as well. And it started off really minor. I would just pop a couple of ibuprofen or paracetamol, and it would just go away after a day or so. Over time, it became a lot more annoying and a lot more bothersome. And so after about 5 years, I figured this is not going to go away anytime soon, and I need to go visit a doctor. So I went to a specialist who examined my ankle, and they took a few scans of the ankle, and it came down to it that the doctor recommended I get some specialized orthotics for putting in my shoes to help correct some of the way I am walking, which was, they said, was part of the problem. And then they gave me some injections to kind of reduce the swelling in my ankle. And it kind of helped, but didn't really help. It was just something that kind of we did to see if that would fix the problem, but ultimately it didn't really resolve the issue. And so the doctor proposed that, another way is just to have surgery. And the way he described it was that they would take and kind of fuse two of my ankle bones together. All of that sounded really terrible and annoying, so I just didn't do it. I dealt with chronic pain in my ankle for 10 years, every day of my life. Even if I was only walking a couple of 100 meters, there would be pain there in my ankle. And if I walked over, 3 or 4 or 5 kilometers a day, it would be unbearable to the point where the next day I would barely be able to walk. I would limp around for most of the day. And so it became really, really problematic. And during this time, kind of during the same time period of my life, I also started struggling with really serious mental health problems. Now, I probably always had struggled with mental health problems. I had probably been struggling with mental health problems my whole life, but I never really recognized it. I just didn't realize that this was not normal. I just figured it was just something everybody kind of experiences. It actually took my partner to point all of this out and to say, yeah, Anthony, this is not necessarily the way most people experience the world. And what you're experiencing is not kind of quote unquote normal. It really first emerged when it came to my sleep. So I've always had really problems, a lot of problems with sleeping. Ever since I was a teenager, on into my adulthood, I had a real problem sleeping at night. I can usually fall asleep really easily, no problem, but it's the staying to sleep that's really challenging for me, and especially staying to sleep when I might wake up in the middle of the morning. So I'm talking early hours here, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. And it got really, really bad as I grew up and as I started a career and as I started to evolve my career, almost to the point where I was sleeping maybe 10 hours over the course of 3 or 4 days. I would get maybe 1 day a week where I would get a solid night's sleep, and every other day was just very disturbed. So I went and saw my doctor after struggling with it for many years, and my doctor prescribed some sleep medication, which kind of helped, but didn't really fix the problem. It just kind of helped me sleep a little bit longer, but I still wasn't getting restful sleep at all. And of course, not sleeping really impairs a lot of other aspects of your life. It affects your mood, it affects the way your brain processes information. So I had been living with kind of in a way, a cognitive disability for many years because of my lack of sleep. And so I found it really challenging to respond in kind of appropriate ways to my personal and my work environment. There were things that would happen at work or in my personal life that would really trigger me that weren't because of the situation at hand, but more because of the way my mind processed the information in combination with the extreme lack of sleep. So in about 35 years of living on the earth, I had acquired a physical disability and a few different forms, I guess you could say, of cognitive or even psychosocial disabilities. Now, if you see me in the street, if I'm just walking down the street or if I'm presenting at a conference and you see me, I don't think you would immediately see someone with a disability. Most of my disabilities are invisible. So people tend not to be aware that I have a disability at all until I kind of talk to them about it and tell them about it. And so in that way, I'm privileged because I don't have to deal with the stigma around living with a disability as being someone who presents as having a disability. And so there are things that I use that help me with my disabilities on a daily basis. So the kind of shoes I buy really, really matters. I can't just buy any old pair of shoes because I won't be able to walk in them. I need to know what kind of terrain I'm going to be walking on, and uneven terrain is just murder for me. So things like hiking, they're really out of the question. It's not something that I can do easily. And so even just being able to enjoy the forest becomes a huge challenge because going out into the woods, you're not likely to experience even terrain. Most of the time, it's going to be very uneven and a little bit difficult. And it's very difficult for someone like me. And for my sleep, for my mental health, I know what medications kind of work for me. I know that balance point where I'm not overly medicated, but I have enough medication that keeps me kind of stable. And I know what triggers my mental health issues, so I try to avoid those triggers, especially at times where I could be very easily triggered. And I've tried really hard, including with therapy, to learn how to respond better to the different triggers that are just part of my life. But all of the things I've learned over these past years don't change the fact that I live with my disability, with multiple disabilities every day. Now, I was an advocate for disability rights a long time before I actually acknowledged my lived experience as a person with a disability. And living openly as a person with a disability has been a really long journey, and it's still really tough for me to think of myself in this way and to publicly make a statement as a person with a disability. And honestly, I don't know why. I haven't reflected on it enough to really understand what is kind of holding me back, I guess you could say, or what kind of keeps me from being a more authentic version of myself. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with bias and kind of internalized ableism. But the takeaway here is this: you, as am I, are complex individuals. We are made up of multiple different identities, and all of these identities collectively make up our experience. Understanding those identities, taking time in your life to reflect on those identities can be really, really empowering. But it can also be a long, long journey to get to that point. So be patient with yourself, love yourself, and know that there are many, many other people out there in the world who share your experience.